recently moved my studio here from Texas Street, and actually there's still paintings, and some of my larger paintings are still there. And these are actually fairly large, but I'm at a point now where I can sit and work here, which is great because what else am I going to do during this time? I have 6, 7, 8, 9 paintings maybe? No, 10 paintings that I'm working on now that are in process, plus an assemblage and some stray pieces. If you look around this room, there are many years here, starting from college, my painting of my grandmother, which is direct painting, and I did it in a day, which is very different than what I do now, which is layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, to get me where I want to go, and because I like the surface, and I like having to sort your image out, actually the other difference between that painting and the other paintings, and actually any of the East Coast paintings, is the color. My color changed when I came out here. I wouldn't have thought so. I thought I was painting bright enough, but apparently not, because the light here is ever so much more. A year and a half ago, 2 years maybe even, I started painting Day of the Dead paintings. So I have this one, which all comes from 2018 Day of the Dead celebration. It's still in process, and it's getting closer. This one, some of my mural interns, plus one of the artists I work with for the mural program. This one, which is actually Buck Burns, who is, and so is that, who is so creative when he participates in our community events, creative in so many ways, artistically, and he's an actor, and he sings, and anyway, so he's a fun subject for sure. And actually, doing this quickly, these are all those, and none of them are quite finished, but they're all closer. As you span around. And then this one, which I think has the furthest to go, because I'm not happy with faces and stuff yet. So this is a year and a half, 2 years worth of work. I didn't work for, I worked very sporadically for the last year and a half, and one of the silver linings in this virus deal is that I get to lock myself in every day and paint. So these are finally moving along. They started with me splashing paint on canvas, and then when I'm happy with the surface, I grit it out, and then when it's gridded, I'll start putting my image on. So this is probably the least, you can't tell what the image is yet, but there is an image beginning to build on there. And then, let's see, the next is that one. And I'm doing this in the order of least finished. And then that one. So you get an idea of how you get there. There are all these images and colors, and I work out a lot of stuff in my artwork.
What do you work out?
My emotional states, and sometimes I don't really realize I'm doing it, but you look back and go, oh, look at that. I do have a whole series that's called On Grief and Praise when I was processing my mother's death, and There are, like, there's this one, you know, a tarot cards, House of Cards. It's a self-portrait. Let's see, the one all the way at the end there with this one here, this one here. Actually, even these little ones, and this little one, and that one, like, I don't know, there might have been 15 paintings to work out. And then sometimes, you know, you go someplace and there's beautiful places and you do that instead. Or birds, or the turkey that used to visit me from next door. Day of the Dead is a favorite of mine. It hits a chord. I remember seeing Mel doing a post every day of doing that pose, and it occurred to me that I wanted to do that idea of finding balance in your life, and I had her compose for me. And she stood on a brick. I put him on fragile eggs because it seemed more appropriate. This one comes from a dream, and there's, like, I think maybe 3 or 4 more that also come from the same dream.
You dream of hearts that are outside a person's body?
I dreamt about a house with a chest of drawers, which actually that one has, and I opened the drawer. It's a house that I used to live in or have, and a chest of drawers, and there was a fetish in there that was a heart and a deer, and it just struck me. And then it seemed, if you think about it, you know, there's a chest, you know, with a heart in it, you know, and it just, again, a sense of trying to find place, and a place where you've been and a place where you're going back to or looking back to. All right, so when I was in college, I was working on several things at the same time, several ideas at the same time. So there was a direct painting and realism. At the same time, I was doing these sewn pieces. So where thread was on top of thread, and then something else magical happens. When you do a layer of that thread, you're putting a layer of color on. I like that, but I couldn't stand, I used to do it on the sewing machine, and it was separate from this. I couldn't stand the sewing machine anymore after a while, because, anyway, so I started. All right, and the other thing that I was doing was the idea of layering and seeing there's this, and then there's this on top of that, and you see some of that, and then there's this, and you see that whole history of everything. I began to integrate them into my work, so it's all one. Now, I don't sew on every piece anymore, necessarily, because when I do, it's very, not neurotic. It takes a lot of energy, and I like it. I like it a lot. I love the way it looks. It's tedious, but I like it, so I do it. But otherwise, I'm doing the grids, and so it's ordering chaos, and it's what else is it? It's changing the way you see things. You know, right here. I mean, I paint layers. So one layer I'm addressing the pattern and the grid, and the other layer I will go and I will, I paint on my hand. I'll be doing the faces or the image. So you're going back and forth between the two, and I don't know, I think it works. I love that comes through and that comes through, and the only way to get it is to go back and forth. You can't, you know, do it in another way. That's kind of.
So is working from a photograph a grossly different experience for you than?
No, it's the same. It's a reference, and you know, I take what I want. You know, it's like I don't have to do. I mean, if you look at that, it's not exactly the same. I mean, there's a lot the same, but I've changed the background. I've changed some of the relationship. But it doesn't hurt to have a reference, especially when you're doing faces and details.
What are you trying to do?
Me,
Like right now, what do you?
I'm using white, and so I'm gonna go only where there are really highlights, and so right here, just to get what I want, so that you still see her face and who she is. You know, nothing wrong with using your fingers. You know, finger painting's fine. There's some 3D quality to some of this. This little section right here sticks totally out, which makes painting on it kind of interesting. So basically, I'm making certain parts recede and giving more of a 3D effect to the image itself. And it's, you know, this constant little push-pull, because I negate the 3D by doing the pattern on top. So sometimes it's confusing, even to me. And when I'm doing tight, I'm holding my brush more like a drawing utensil than
Does would you do you work in stages?
what do you mean?
Well, so like I think of this as, is this more of a, is this the home stretch?
This is actually getting down to the home stretch. I will start letting go of these paintings soon. I mean, this is so much closer than it was, but it's not quite there yet. You know, someone said, how do you know when a painting's done? And sometimes it's just a matter of there's nothing else left to do to it, you know? And so it's either successful at that point or it's not.
Do you find yourself going through sort of emotional, mental preparation before you sit down in front of a painting?
I will do, if it's not this, or if it's something like I'm trying to work out, say like the painting and Mel's being balanced. I mean, this one is inspiring just because of what it is. Yeah, I'll do some thumbnails and then I'll think about it, and then I kind of have an energy that I want, and I've worked so much and so long that I have a pretty good idea of how the painting is going to turn out. Sometimes there are surprises, and sometimes you make decisions along the way that change the direction you're going, you know. So what can I say? And I use only the best brushes. That used to be square flat. So what? It's funny.
When you put, you know, I don't know how many hours it takes you to do, you know, a big painting of these characters, you know, the people that are interwoven into your lives. And I imagine with, you know, subject matter that's so well defined, and with personalities that are so well defined, do you sell your portraits?
Yeah, they to some extent. Although sometimes, you know, it gets in the way. It's like people can't help but see the person in. And I did a painting years ago. I mean, years ago, I was still in school, of Bob as a sad-faced clown, and he makes a perfect sad-faced clown. Except that the friend I did it for, all she could see was Bob, even under all that paint. So it was kind of a funny, yeah. Sometimes it gets in the way, but these people are standing in for stuff, you know. And in some ways, the people that I'm painting are also self-portraits, you know. I mean, because really, it's reflective of what I'm thinking. Although I did do a portrait of Faye, where she had, I don't know, 12 arms, you know, and all juggling all the things she had, and with broken eggs, no, you know, eggs on the ground, and you know. So it was, that one was definitely her, but still a statement. I mean, because it related to me too at the same time.
How do you best encapsulate yourself as an artist? How do you describe yourself in 2 sentences or less?
A mixed media artist. I don't know. I don't know how I would describe myself, actually.
Why do you paint?
I don't know, it calls to me. I mean, why do you hold a camera?
Because you asked me to.
That's not the reason you hold a camera. You know, it calls to you in some way. It's a means of expression. And there's always that next idea, you know, of, I mean, I never understand the people who say, I don't know what to paint next. Because, you know.
So would you call your work generative?
Generative?
Mm-hmm.
As in, you know, it feeds itself?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, like, there were people were saying, well, aren't you going to have trouble getting started again? And I went, no. I mean, that's never been an issue, ever. I can't remember. You know, it's like the thing of, do you ever get bored? No. How do you get bored? You know, it's like, there's always a thought or a train of thought somewhere.
If you didn't have an audience, would you still paint?
Yes. If no one ever bought anything, yes. You know, that I have friends who say, well, you know, I have all this work that's sitting there and I feel guilty, like, painting more. And I go, well, why? I mean, I have a lot of paintings here, but I've sold half as many, you know, through the years. So
your big paintings, what are these, like 10 feet by 8 feet?
no, well, I have paintings that are 10 feet by 8 feet. These are only 6.5 by maybe 8 feet.
Now, what would be a quality of the space that these would live?
Well, I did a show with C.C. Stanford way back in 2003 or 4 at the Art Museum in Cruces, and that was the perfect venue. But it'd have to be a big house with big walls, and otherwise the pieces themselves would dwarf the space. You know, it would be overwhelming.
Do you have anything hanging commercially anywhere?
I mean,
Oh, it's in a bank or, you know, the
sure.
Chase Manhattan foyer.
Oh, like, well, there's a piece at the Miller Library. There are pieces around town. For the longest time, I had my work hanging at the airport. I have work at the Holiday Inn Express. I have work at the Murray Hotel. Trying to think where else.
The nonprofit center.
Oh, the nonprofit, and I've heard of that place. Yeah, it's good storage.
Okay, so I have to ask, why these? What's with these?
It's the grid. It's just the grid's getting smaller, what it takes up. But in the beginning, you know, it's totally covered.
Yeah.
Right, and so you see some of that, but at some point, I'm letting the image itself emerge by shrinking down the grid, shrinking the space of the grid that I'm using.
So, but the grid becomes part of the subject matter.
It does, in a way, doesn't it?
It's not an organizational tool.
Right. It does. I mean, you're shooting back and forth between the two things, for sure.
Is there some sort of meaning behind the grid?
I was doing grids again
Because people are behind the grid, they're not in front of the grid.
No, they're in the grid.
They're in the grid?
Yeah. I mean, it goes. Well, I guess in some ways
Because I don't see this little piece right here behind the hair with part of it exposed. So the grid always...
it comes through, but see, there's color on top of that if you look. And then there's color here. It just depends on what color you're using, so I'm not going to make
Is that even paint? What is that?
There's paper on there.
There's paper on there. You need to tell people about that. That's not... You can't just pretend that it's all paint.
It's not all it's also colored pencil.
Oh, well...
Right now I'm
The paper is like... Okay, you have to talk about the paper.
Well, it's another way of putting pattern on, and right now that's shrunk down enough that you barely see it. So there's a little bit of stripe in there. But when it's bigger, it has echoes in the back. And it used to be that I'd separated out the grid, like in that, and I still do that, and then have the images. So taking away the thread, I can do the image in here too. Couldn't do it otherwise. So I go back and forth between having the grid contained and having it all in one piece. You never noticed there's one here before?
No, not on this. No.
That's funny.
But, I take things at very superficial face value. I don't necessarily get up close and ask the question how.
Right.
And I know with your work that this is like when I discovered your thread. Mm-hmm. Like I thought you just drew it.
That's funny.
Wow, man, that's tedious.
Yeah, that's the truth. But it has a certain look that you're not going to get any other way, There's a 3D quality.
I was going to say, it brings a sculptural quality into there.
It does. That's funny. Try not to get too much paint on my brush.